I walked into that modeling agency with my horse, and they burst out laughing. They said I was crazy, that it wasn't a place for country animals, but when the photographer saw the beauty of my horse, everything changed. Subscribe to our channel now and discover how a simple farmer and his horse silenced the fashion world with a campaign no one expected. The sun was just beginning to rise over the Kentucky hills when Samuel Adams awoke, as he did every day, before the first roosters crow. At 58, his face bore the marks of a man who had dedicated his entire life to the land. Calloused hands, skin weathered by the sun, and a gaze that mixed wisdom and simplicity. On his small property in Oak Ridge, he had lived alone since Mary, his wife, had left to fulfill her dream of living with their daughter in the big city of New York. That June morning, as he walked through fields covered with a thin layer of dew, his eyes found Thunder, his magnificent Tennessee walking horse. With a dark chestnut coat, almost black, and a physique that seemed sculpted by divine hands, the animal grazed peacefully under the first rays of sunlight. "Good morning, partner," said Sam, approaching with a handful of apples harvested from his small orchard. The horse raised his head, recognizing his owner's voice, and walked toward him. It was a bond built over 8 years, since Thunder was born on that same farm. Sam stroked the animal's gleaming neck while he savored the fruit. "You're the most beautiful creature on this earth, you know that?" murmured the farmer, observing how the horse's coat shone in the sun. That day, while feeding Thunder, Sam remembered the letter he had received from Rachel, his daughter. Among family news and requests for him to visit New York, there was a magazine clipping showing purebred horses in photo shoots for famous brands. "Dad, Thunder is more handsome than all of these. Why don't you try?" said the handwritten note from his daughter. Sam laughed at the idea. Who would be interested in a horse raised by an old farmer from rural Kentucky? But as the day progressed, and he watched Thunder running freely through the fields, the seed planted by Rachel began to germinate in his mind. 2 weeks later, after much hesitation, Sam made a decision that would change his life. He called his daughter and announced that he would visit her in New York, and he would bring Thunder. Rachel was thrilled and promised to arrange a visit to Platinum Models, one of the country's most prestigious modeling agencies, where she worked as an administrative assistant. The trip was planned with meticulous care. Transporting the horse required special logistics, but Sam insisted it would be done in the most comfortable way possible for Thunder. He wouldn't cut corners when it came to his companion's well-being. The arrival in New York was a shock of worlds. The farmer, with his weathered straw hat and dusty boots, felt like a fish out of water among the skyscrapers and the frenetic rhythm of the metropolis. His daughter received him with warm hugs and concerned looks. "Are you sure you want to do this, Dad?" asked Rachel, as she helped him settle into the small apartment she shared with her husband. "We've come this far, my girl. Let's see what happens," he replied, trying to hide his own nervousness. The next morning, Sam prepared for the meeting at the agency. He put on his best shirt, though it was too simple by New York standards, and spent hours brushing Thunder's coat until it shone like polished obsidian. When they finally arrived at the imposing headquarters of Platinum Models in Soho, the receptionist's eyes widened as she saw the simple countryman enter through the smoked glass doors, leading a majestic horse through the marble lobby. "Sir, you can't come in with an animal in here," exclaimed the young woman, abruptly rising from her chair. "My daughter works here, Rachel Adams. She must have told you about our visit," replied Sam, maintaining his dignity despite the looks of astonishment and stifled laughter that began to emerge among the employees and models circulating around the place. The confusion only increased when Rachel appeared, visibly embarrassed, trying to explain the situation to her superior, Deborah Vanderbilt, the executive director of the agency. The woman, impeccably dressed and with an incredulous expression, approached the farmer. "Mr. Adams, I understand you've come from far away, but we don't schedule sessions for animals," she said with an icy smile. "My daughter told me you work with beauty. Thunder has more beauty than most folks around here," Sam retorted without being intimidated. The response provoked poorly disguised laughter among those present. Slender models and elegant producers observed the scene, as if it were a rural comedy in the midst of this temple of sophistication. Sam felt his face burn with embarrassment, but remained firm, one hand resting on Thunder's neck, who remained surprisingly calm in the strange environment. It was at this moment that Gregory Mitchell, one of the agency's most renowned photographers, crossed the lobby. Unlike the others, he didn't laugh. His eyes, trained by decades of photographing the most beautiful people and landscapes in the world, immediately fixed on the horse. "Where did this animal come from?" he asked, approaching slowly. "From my farm in Oak Ridge, Kentucky," replied Sam, noticing something different in the man's gaze. Greg circled Thunder, observing every detail of his perfect anatomy. The unusual shine of his coat, the proud posture, that seemed to defy the artificial environment around him. "Deborah, are you seeing what I'm seeing?" asked the photographer without taking his eyes off the horse. "I see an animal that's about to be removed from my lobby," replied the director, irritated by the situation. "I see the Eleganza campaign," retorted Greg, referring to the prestigious Italian fashion brand that was looking for something extraordinarily unique for its next collection. Silence took over the environment. Deborah looked at Thunder again, this time with different eyes. The laughter completely ceased when Greg pulled out his professional camera and began photographing the animal right there in the lobby. 10 minutes in Studio 3, he decided. "Bring some natural lights and remove the white background. I want something more organic." Before Sam could understand what was happening, he and Thunder were led to a spacious studio on the 3rd floor. The farmer watched, astonished, the frenzied movement of assistants preparing the environment following Greg's precise orders. "Your horse is extraordinary," said the photographer, adjusting his camera. "What's his name?" "Thunder," replied Sam, still suspicious of the sudden change in treatment. "Perfect now, Mr. Adams, Samuel Adams. Mr. Adams, stand beside him. Don't pose, just be as you would on your farm." The flashes began to flash, and Thunder, surprisingly, remained serene, as if understanding the importance of that moment. No command was necessary. The horse seemed to know exactly how to position himself, alternating between direct looks at the camera and majestic profiles that highlighted his perfect silhouette. In less than an hour, Greg had captured hundreds of images. When he stopped to review them on his computer screen, an involuntary wow escaped from his lips. The assistants crowded to see, and soon expressions of admiration filled the studio. "I've never seen anything like this," murmured one of the assistants. Rachel, who was watching everything from a corner, approached her father with tears in her eyes. "I told you he was special, Dad." Sam just nodded, a mixture of pride and apprehension taking over his heart. The sparkle in those people's eyes when looking at his Thunder was the same he had always seen from the first day. The difference was that now that sparkle came accompanied by dollar signs. At the end of the session, Deborah Vanderbilt, with a completely transformed expression, approached Sam with a preliminary contract in her hands. "Mr. Adams, we would like to represent your horse. I believe we have a unique opportunity here." Sam looked at the document, then at Thunder, and finally at his daughter, who smiled with enthusiasm. Something told him that this was just the beginning of a journey, much greater than he could have ever imagined. In just 2 weeks, the name Thunder became a phenomenon in the fashion world. The first photographs, published in a special edition of Style America magazine, caused a furor. The unusual combination of the majestic Tennessee Walker with Sam's authentic simplicity created a contrast that charmed the public, tired of the artificiality that dominated the market. Platinum Models organized an emergency meeting to discuss the future of the newest model in their catalog. Deborah Vanderbilt, once skeptical, now led the meeting with almost feverish enthusiasm. "We've received proposals from 5 major brands," she announced, walking through the conference room with firm steps. "Eleganza offered an exclusive contract for 1 year, but the Natural Life proposal is more financially interesting." Rachel, seated next to her father, translated the terms into language he could understand. Sam listened to everything with an impassive expression, unconsciously caressing the hat he held in his lap. "And what is the opinion of Thunder's owner?" asked Greg, who observed the scene with a certain critical distance. The photographer was the only one who seemed to notice the farmer's discomfort. All eyes turned to Sam. He cleared his throat, adjusted himself in the modern design chair that seemed disproportionately small for his robust body, and finally spoke. "I want to know how you'll treat my horse. He's not a machine. He has feelings, needs space, respect." The direct tone and genuine concern caught the executives by surprise. They were accustomed to negotiating with experienced and ambitious agents, not with a simple man whose main concern was the well-being of his animal. "Of course, Mr. Adams," replied Deborah, quickly recovering. "We'll ensure the best conditions for Thunder. Luxury stables, specialized handlers." "He stays with me," interrupted Sam. "Wherever I am, he will be. And I don't want you to paint his coat or put strange things on him. Thunder is not a doll." The firmness in his voice silenced the room. Deborah exchanged glances with the other executives before continuing. "I understand your concerns, but some productions may require aesthetic adaptations." "Then we don't have a deal," replied Sam, standing up. "Come on, Rachel. We're going back to Oak Ridge tomorrow." It was Greg who prevented him from leaving. "Wait, Sam, I think we can find a middle ground. What makes Thunder special is precisely his natural beauty, his authenticity. It doesn't make sense to modify him." After hours of negotiation, they reached an agreement. Thunder would only participate in productions that respected his nature. Sam would have the final word on any photo shoot, and the horse would remain under his care. The fees would be substantial, enough to completely transform the farmer's life. The first campaigns were a resounding success. Thunder graced the pages of fashion magazines, billboards, and even the facade of a concept store on Fifth Avenue. The image of the gleaming coated horse against minimalist backgrounds or natural landscapes created a visual impact impossible to ignore. Sam rented a small ranch on the outskirts of New York to stay close to the photo shoots without subjecting Thunder to urban life. Every morning, he woke before dawn to ride with his companion, maintaining the routine they both knew. It was during this seemingly idyllic period that the first crisis arose. Without Sam's knowledge or authorization, Platinum Models authorized the digital manipulation of some of Thunder's images. In a campaign for a luxury product brand, the horse appeared in sophisticated urban settings where he had never been, with his coat digitally altered to look shinier and his posture modified to look more commercial. When the images were released in a preview for the press, Rachel immediately brought the magazines to the ranch where her father was staying. "How could they do this?" raged Sam, throwing the magazines on the table. "This isn't my Thunder, it's a lie." The farmer's indignation led him directly to Deborah Vanderbilt's office. The discussion that followed was heard throughout the agency. "You signed a contract, Mr. Adams," argued Deborah, maintaining her professional composure. "Clause 23 allows aesthetic adjustments to the final images." "Adjustments? You've turned Thunder into a digital puppet," Sam retorted, slamming his fist on the table. "This ends today. Our contract is cancelled." "It's not that simple," replied Deborah with a tense smile. "There are substantial termination penalties." Sam left the agency determined to fight for what he believed in. The next day, the original and manipulated versions of Thunder's photos were leaked to fashion journalists, along with a letter written by Sam himself explaining the situation. The public's reaction was immediate and surprising. Instead of harming Thunder's image, the controversy only increased his popularity. Hashtags like #Real Thunder and Authentic Beauty took over social media. The discussion went beyond the fashion world and entered debates about authenticity, image manipulation, and commercial ethics. In the midst of the media storm, a young independent documentary filmmaker named Caitlin Rivers contacted Rachel. She wanted to make a documentary about Thunder and Sam, showing the real story behind the cameras. "Why are you interested in us?" asked Sam, suspicious after the experience with the agency. "Because your story is about resistance," replied Caitlin. "About staying true in a world that values the artificial, and because Thunder is truly special." After much thought, Sam agreed. For weeks, Caitlin followed the routine of the farmer and his horse, recording the moments of complicity between The two, the simple life on the ranch, and the behind-the-scenes of the photo shoots that continued to happen, now under independent contracts negotiated by Rachel. The documentary, Thunder: Real Beauty, premiered at a small film festival and quickly became a viral phenomenon. The story of the Kentucky farmer who challenged one of the country's largest modeling agencies in the name of authenticity touched the hearts of millions. Meanwhile, Greg Mitchell, who had resigned from Platinum Models after the controversy, published a luxurious photography book titled Free Spirit, containing only unmanipulated images of Thunder in his natural environment. The book became an instant bestseller and received praise from specialized critics for the purity of its approach. As Thunder's fame grew organically, based on values of authenticity and genuine connection, Platinum Models observed from afar, planning its next move. Deborah Vanderbilt had not given up. In a closed-door meeting with her lawyers, the executive hit the table with determination. "I want the rights to that horse's image back, and I want that hillbilly out of my way." The lawyers exchanged concerned looks before the most experienced one responded, "We can try a lawsuit alleging that since the first images were produced in our facilities, we have a stake in the intellectual property." "Do it," ordered Deborah, "and I want it to be quick. Fashion Week is coming, and we need to resolve this before then." While the lawsuit papers were being prepared, Sam received an unexpected proposal. A major international brand of natural products wanted Thunder to be the face of their new line of vegan cosmetics, with the condition that part of the profits would go to the preservation of wild horses in Montana. The proposal delighted Sam, but before he could accept, he was surprised by the process server who knocked on his ranch door with a summons in hand. The legal battle that was announced promised to shake the foundations not only of Sam and Thunder's life, but of the entire industry that had transformed a simple horse from rural Kentucky into a symbol of resistance to the artificiality of the modern world. The news of the lawsuit filed by Platinum Models against Sam spread quickly. The country's main media outlets reported the case as the battle for Thunder, the simple farmer against the corporate giant, rural authenticity facing urban sophistication. When Sam arrived at the downtown Manhattan courthouse for the first hearing, he was greeted by a crowd of supporters. Children with horse drawings, environmentalists, animal lovers, and ordinary people who identified with his fight for authenticity formed a barrier of solidarity. "I didn't expect all this support," he commented to Rachel, visibly moved. "The whole country is with you, Dad," she replied, squeezing his hand. In the courtroom, the contrast was striking. On one side, Sam, with his simple suit, bought especially for the occasion, accompanied by a young lawyer who had offered to represent him pro bono after watching the documentary. On the other, Deborah Vanderbilt, surrounded by a team of corporate lawyers from a renowned New York firm. Platinum Models' claim was clear. Since the first photographs that made Thunder famous were taken in their facilities, using their equipment and technical team, the agency would have rights to the animal's image. Additionally, they argued that the contract signed by Sam, even though it had been subsequently cancelled, guaranteed the agency a percentage of any future work related to the horse. "My client is a simple man who did not understand the implications of the contract he signed," argued Sam's lawyer. "Besides, we're talking about a living being, not a product created by the agency." Judge Matthew Thompson, known for his rigor and impartiality, remained neutral during the entire initial exposition. When it was Sam's turn to speak, a respectful silence took over the room. "Your Honor, I'm not a learned man and I don't understand much about these complicated laws," he began, with a firm voice despite his nervousness. "But I know right from wrong. Thunder is not a thing that can be owned like a photograph or a piece of clothing. He is a being that feels, that trusts me. What this agency wants to do is transform him into something he is not, use his image in ways that disrespect his nature." The sincerity in his words touched even some of Platinum's lawyers. Judge Thompson, after hearing both sides, ordered a 2-week recess to analyze the case, which presented complex issues about image rights, intellectual property, and, curiously, animal rights. In the period that followed, the case gained even greater dimensions. Law professors debated the topic in universities, ethics specialists discussed the limits of commercial exploitation of animals, and even political figures took positions on the subject. Greg Mitchell, who had already distanced himself from Platinum, models came forward publicly to support Sam. In an emotional interview on a widely watched program, the photographer revealed the behind-the-scenes of the agency and how Thunder's authentic beauty had been a watershed in his own career. "I spent years photographing models who looked like plastic dolls, creating images that promoted unattainable standards," he confessed. "When I first saw Thunder, I rediscovered the real meaning of beauty. We couldn't transform him into just another artificial product." On the eve of the judicial decision, Sam received an unexpected visit at his ranch. Deborah Vanderbilt, without her usual escort of assistants and lawyers, appeared alone. Her countenance, always impeccable before, showed signs of fatigue and concern. "Can we talk?" she asked, with a humility that surprised Sam. Seated on the simple porch with Thunder grazing peacefully in the background, the executive finally laid her cards on the table. "This battle is destroying the agency's reputation. Brands are canceling contracts, models are looking for other agencies, and public opinion is completely against us." "And what do you expect me to do?" asked Sam, without hostility, but with firmness. "I came to propose a deal. We withdraw the lawsuit, and in exchange, you and Thunder participate in a special campaign for Platinum. A campaign about authenticity, about real beauty. No manipulations, no artifices." Sam looked at the horizon for a long moment before responding. "I have nothing against you or your agency, Ms. Vanderbilt. My fight was never about money or fame. It was about respect for Thunder's nature, for the right to keep things true in a world that seems to value only the artificial." "I'm beginning to understand that," she admitted. "If you withdraw the lawsuit and publicly commit to respecting authenticity in your future campaigns, not just with Thunder, but with all your models, we can talk about a collaboration." The next day, to the surprise of everyone present in the courtroom, Platinum Models' lawyers announced the withdrawal of the lawsuit. In a joint statement, Sam and Deborah announced an unprecedented partnership, the creation of a line of ethical guidelines for the use of animals in advertising campaigns, which would be adopted not only by Platinum, but proposed as a standard for the entire industry. Sam's legal and moral victory brought with it new responsibilities. Invitations for speeches, book proposals, and documentaries multiplied. But amid all this excitement, an idea began to form in his mind, something that could transform his personal experience into a lasting legacy. On a Sunday afternoon, while riding Thunder through the ranch fields, Sam shared his thoughts with Rachel and Caitlin, who had become constant presences in his new life. "I always thought I would die on that little farm in Oak Ridge, taking care of my animals and living in peace," he confessed. "But now I have resources and visibility. I want to do something bigger." 6 months later, on a 125-acre area on the outskirts of New York, the Thunder Connection Animal Center was inaugurated, a space where children from public schools, elderly from nursing homes, and people with special needs could interact with horses rescued from abuse or abandoned by their former owners. The project, funded with resources obtained from Thunder's advertising campaigns and with donations from companies that embraced the cause, quickly became a national reference in animal-assisted therapy and environmental education. Thunder, now 10 years, old but still majestic, became the living symbol of the center. His story was told to all visitors as an example of how authentic beauty can transform lives and change perceptions. The inauguration of the center brought back many of the characters who had participated in Sam and Thunder's journey. Greg Mitchell set up a permanent exhibition with his best photographs of the horse. Caitlin Rivers produced a new documentary about the project. Even Deborah Vanderbilt attended, bringing with her a group of young models for a day of volunteering, part of a new Platinum Models program focused on social responsibility. In a particularly moving moment of the ceremony, Sam, now with completely white hair but with the same determined sparkle in his eyes, climbed onto the small stage for a speech. 2 years ago, I was just a lonely Kentucky farmer who talked more to his horse than to people, he began, drawing smiles from the audience. I never sought fame or wealth. What brought me here was something much simpler: love for authenticity, respect for the nature of things and beings. Looking at Thunder, who grazed peacefully in a nearby paddock, he continued, "This place is not just about horses or therapy. It's about reconnecting people with what is most true in themselves. It's about showing that, in an increasingly artificial world, real beauty still has the power to transform lives." When he finished his speech, he was received with a standing ovation. Children ran to hug him while photographers captured the moment. Sam, visibly moved, walked to Thunder and rested his head against the animals, in a gesture of intimacy that said more than any word. That night, alone in the small house built on the center's property, Sam sat on the porch to contemplate the stars, a habit he had maintained since his days in Oak Ridge. Thunder silently approached and rested his head on his shoulder. "Who would have thought, my friend?" murmured the farmer, caressing the animal's neck. "All this because I saw beauty where no one else did." Thunder's gentle neigh seemed like a response, as if the animal understood every word. And perhaps he did understand, for the connection between the two went far beyond words. It was made of mutual respect, trust, and a sincerity that had won the heart of an entire country. The story of the farmer and his extraordinary horse would continue to inspire generations, reminding everyone that true beauty needs no filters or manipulations. It simply exists, waiting to be recognized by those who have eyes to see. Dear listeners, we hope that Sam and Thunder's journey has touched your hearts. To continue being moved by stories that celebrate authenticity and genuine connection, we've prepared a special playlist with equally inspiring narratives. Find it here on the button to the left of the screen. If this story awakened something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Every day we bring new stories that explore the depths of the human soul and the transformative relationships we build throughout life. Share with us in the comments. What was the moment that moved you the most in this story? What would you do in Sam's place? We're eager to read your impressions.